So what you see here is our global MVNO growth forecast. Overall connection growth for personal mobile services around the world right now is about 4.5% per annum. MVNO connections are growing at about 18% per annum, 4 times faster than the average rate for the mobile industry. So the MVNO share of the global mobile industry is rising. It's rising steadily, and it's going to continue to do so over the entire forecast period out to 2019. In Australia, MVNO is already big, and the growth rate is starting to settle. MVNO market accounts for about 7.9% of total mobile connections right now, and that's the second highest in the Asian region after Hong Kong. The growth rate for connections here is about 2% per annum, and we expect the total share to reach about 9.1% by 2019. So the MVNO model, both here and overseas, is healthy and it's growing. So why? What are the drivers of that success? Well, let's take a look at this from the point of view of segments. Where are these growth prospects? Ovum surveyed about 440 MVNO providers and their underlying network providers around the world to get a picture of what the growth pattern is. And we asked each player which segments they saw as the leading growth opportunity. Now, unsurprisingly, everyone had a different idea about what their growth opportunity was, but it broke down like this. Youth, media and entertainment topped the list. 38% nominated that as their highest growth prospect. And unsurprisingly, the retail brand extenders were also a strong growth prospect. A lot of strong responses around segments around communities, social movements. That was also strong, but of course there are another youth-dominated segment, so once again youth comes out very strongly for MVNOs. The ethnic segments have been and remain a good prospect. And we're starting to see some device management and M2M specialists emerge in the MVNO space around the world. The business segment was nominated less often, but that of course also reflects some of the lower volumes in that market. So there are actually MVNOs specialising in enterprise comms. And finally, there are some rural specialists doing fixed mobile substitution. Now that's a bit less relevant to Australia because of the NBN, the fixed wireless networks and the satellite networks which are being put into operation. We also asked, though, which MVNOs were sticking to the unsegmented discount strategy that we've seen in the past. Only 13% said they were. So in other words, the vast majority of MVNOs we spoke to were interested in segmentation and getting a better marketing outcome from that. So that overall positive picture is being driven by factors both on the demand and the supply side. On the demand side, there have been some big changes in consumer spending patterns that have made them more receptive to MVNOs. Generally, there's been a shrinking pool of consumer spending since the GFC relative to what we were seeing beforehand. That's generated some margin pressure, free cash flow restrictions in the telco industry, affected investment capacity, but what's behind it is the emergence of this generation of discerning and thrifty customers. Now, it's not that they're not spending. They're still spending, but they're being more discerning about how they're doing it. There's still a market there, and there's a lot of work being done around the world to refocus on improving ARPU and segmentation of the market. And out of that is coming some new sources of revenue, particularly on the enterprise side. A big drive to productivity growth, to digitalisation, and the Internet of Things is the platform that's emerging to address that. So generally the consumer segment has become a bit tougher. A lot of new opportunities arising in the enterprise segment. And these trends are pretty much the same in Australia and globally, creating new opportunity for MVNO players. On the supply side, there have been a number of developments which have been helping MVNOs. The greater availability of LTE wholesale products, that's helping usage and helping ARPUs. The emergence of cloud-based platforms and standardised API, which are operationalising BSS and OSS functionality, bringing revenue growth more in line with cost growth. And generally, mobile's moving to the centre of applications development and deployment. And that development is accelerating. So mobile is a good part of the industry to be in at the moment. One consequence of all this is that the technical barriers to MVNO entry are actually falling. Brand and distribution capability are increasingly now the difference between success and failure. And of course there's disruption in the pipeline as well. And the main one that we see coming in the mobile and MVNO industry specifically are the device and consumer electronics companies gradually turning themselves into global MVNOs. These are the most threatening disruptors in the mobile sector. I mean, there are some big brands involved here: Apple, Google, Samsung, Huawei, Dell. What all these players are trying to move towards is giving customers the option of out-of-the-box operation of network devices. They want to ship devices with mobile connection already operating, and they're increasingly looking at launching global multi-domestic MVNO or resale services in order to do that. And inevitably their brand power is going to raise the level of competition in the MVNO market. And just to show you that this doesn't necessarily have to happen at the big end of town, it can happen at a small scale too. This is just an example that I'm personally familiar with because I like to play with microcontrollers. The Particle is the name of a company that was launched in May 2013 as a Kickstarter project. They offer a cloud-based management platform for prototyping and launch of IoT products and services. They market their own hardware. This photograph here is of one of their devices. There's a Wi-Fi version of this device, but in 2 months' time they're launching a 2G, 3G cellular version of this device. And what this device will have is, again, out-of-the-box connectivity. So what they've done is put together a 100-country MVNO and resale deal with various operators around the world. Telstra, as it happens, is the local mobile network operator for Particle. The only thing I really want you to take out of this is that even 2-year-old Kickstarter companies are getting into the game. And this again just underlines this point about the lowering barriers to entry in this market. Okay, so what do MVNOs do about it? How do you get strategic? Well, MVNOs are now increasingly no longer just focused on the low-end subprime customers. The variety of value propositions is growing. We're seeing segmentation in the general consumer market, more customised offers designed to attract particular segments, and also demand for integrated business mobility driving enterprise segment offers. In the relationship between the mobile network operator underlying the MVNO, what increasingly we're seeing is MNOs seeing MVNOs as partners, filling in solutions for sub-segments which mobile network operators find difficult to reach. So successful network operator strategy is now about facilitating these MVNO partnerships. It's not just about selling excess capacity anymore. And what they're looking for are successful MVNOs that can bring a proposition to these segments and sub-segments. Successful MVNOs increasingly will need some kind of differentiation to do that. And how do you get that differentiation? Well, there are two kind of main ways. The two main strategies we're seeing MVNOs adopting is either leveraging a distribution network or leveraging a brand. The differences are summarised on this slide. I won't go through it dot point by dot point. In between, there are quite a few options. We see quite a lot of mixed strategies going on. The distributor leverage some sort of pre-existing distribution network, and they often co-brand with the underlying network. Typically, there'll be some shared branding and some shared advertising. The distributor often has just a one-time interaction with the customer and doesn't develop a strong relationship. At the other extreme, the branded player is really striving to own the customer. They've got complete control over branding and advertising, and leverage that brand appeal into their chosen subsegments. They're all about ongoing relationship with the customer. It's harder to do, but the rewards are higher. Now, between these, of course, there's a spectrum, and you see lots of players in the market, often doing a bit of both, leveraging both brand and distribution networks, for example, the retail brand extenders being the classic example of that. Now, for players without an advantage in distribution, branding is indispensable. And owning the customer and building that loyalty requires a more complex and valued relationships. Customers are looking for value, not just low prices. And they do reward value with loyalty. So some examples of this kind of deeper relationship can even include things like understanding location, behavioural patterns, leveraging this to improve direct marketing and loyalty programs, all in a completely non-creepy way, of course. We don't want to upset people too much. But there's a data lake building up underneath telcos and some of the associated brands in these markets that's being used to drive value for customers. So it's therefore no surprise to see grocery chains like Aldi and Woolworths, Tesco in the UK, leveraging their existing brand into the mobile network along with their distribution advantage and using that to build loyalty both to the shopping brand and to the mobile brand. But this perception of value has to be built on something real. There needs to be some real, substantial differentiation to build and sustain a brand. So when we spoke to our 440 MVNO industry players, we asked them what strategies they were finding most important for differentiation. And here are the top 4 responses. Adding innovative products and services, particularly through bundling, addressing new market segments, entering adjacent markets like travel, insurance or advertising, and then finally expanding internationally. Now, what I've plotted here are the ones that nominated these strategies as most important, and some of them nominated them as somewhat important. There was also another category about not important, but I didn't think that was terribly interesting. The top response for the most important strategy was adding new services and bundles. Not too far behind that, as you can see on that left-hand graph, is focusing on new sub-segments, so about refining brand and pitch. Less likely to be the most important strategy were expanding into adjacent service markets or going international. But be careful about interpreting these numbers, because what this actually shows is that for a minority of players, those less popular strategies actually were the most important strategy. What determines the best strategy for any given MVNO? Well, it really comes down to what assets you have, where you are in the market, and the opportunities you have to leverage them. And just quickly, these are some of the things that were nominated in the survey as being important for differentiation, or particularly around product innovation. Cloud-based applications to support IP voice, messaging and services like device backup, that topped the list in Australia and globally, and that was closely followed by improving mobile broadband offering, particularly access to LTE capacity. Now, there's no getting away from the cost side of the equation as well. Cost control matters a lot, and MVNOs are getting sharper and sharper on cost control. What's happened in the last few years is that costs like OSS and BSS, customer acquisition, retention and marketing, might have been as low as 30% 5 or 6 years ago, and some places now they're climbing up towards 60%. Typical existing proportions of cost are on the left-hand side of that table. The ways that they're going about trying to cut these costs are things like self-service and using social networking to support customers. Operators are creating and hosting cloud-based self-care systems in order to support their MVNOs. And this is more likely to come from some of the traditional fixed wholesale business units. OPEX models are also proving very important. MVNOs need their costs to scale along with their revenues. High CapEx is anathema, and the cloud is proving very important for that purpose. And then there's a growing importance of aggregators. The majority of aggregators are still following the classic sub-wholesaler model, where the MVNA aggregates demand from multiple MVNOs. Aggregators are increasingly hosting BSS and OSS capabilities in the cloud. That's helping MVNOs to reset the cost base and support a pay-as-you-play model. There are also some new cost elements there at the bottom that arise out of adjacent market strategies. These use voice minutes, SMS or data as a reward for supporting a company's primary business. Fixed telcos, cable cos and other pay TV service providers and the large-scale retailers are the main people playing in this space. So just to wrap up, these are the 6 factors we think contribute to MVNO success. Awareness of new competition and changes in the market, having a clear segment strategy, having a complementary brand and product offering to the MNO to build that strategic relationship, the strength of the brand, and if you're outside the mobile market, whether that translates into mobile, differentiation in product and service, and finally, cost control.